She said, "Don't look at me like that." I smiled and replied, "Then don't be so beautiful." That's the moment everything changed. I still remember that afternoon like it was carved into sunlight. I had come over to my friend's house for something ordinary, to hang out, maybe grab a game or two, nothing that was supposed to feel significant. But when the door opened, nothing about it felt ordinary anymore. It wasn't my friend standing there. It was his mother. She was 40, maybe a little older, but the kind of woman who carried herself with quiet grace, as if age hadn't diminished her beauty but deepened it. She wore a light summer dress that shifted in the breeze, her hair catching the sunlight just enough to make me forget why I had come. For a second too long, my eyes lingered. I should have looked away, but I couldn't. There was something magnetic in the way she stood there, casual yet commanding, like she didn't even realize how much presence she carried. Her lips curved slightly, as though she was fighting back a smile, but her eyes gave her away, a flicker of awareness that I was looking at her differently than I ever had before. "Don't look at me like that," she said softly, a playful warning laced with nervousness. It wasn't harsh. It wasn't distant. It was teasing, but there was a tremor beneath her words, as though even she didn't expect to feel what she was feeling in that moment. I laughed it off, mumbling something about being surprised to see her. But inside, my chest was tight, my heart stumbling in a rhythm it wasn't used to. I had known her for years, seen her in passing dozens of times, but never like this. Never in the silence of an open doorway with golden afternoon light framing her like a secret I wasn't meant to discover. Stepping aside, she let me in, and I caught the faint scent of flowers drifting from the hallway vase. The house was warm, filled with the faint clatter of dishes from the kitchen and the hum of a ceiling fan overhead. Everything familiar, and yet, nothing felt the same anymore. As we walked toward the living room, I tried to steady myself, telling myself it was just respect, just admiration. But I knew I was lying. Something had shifted, subtle but undeniable. The way she smiled, the way her eyes darted away and back again, it was as though a door had opened that neither of us planned to unlock. And in that very first glance, something fragile yet powerful began. I sat in the living room, pretending to be relaxed, though my mind hadn't stopped replaying that moment at the door. My friend's mom moved gracefully around the space, her presence impossible to ignore. She carried herself with the kind of confidence that didn't need to be loud, every gesture, every glance seemed deliberate, effortless. "Would you like some tea?" she asked, her voice gentle, carrying a warmth that felt both motherly and something else. I nodded quickly, maybe too quickly, and she disappeared into the kitchen. While she was gone, I stared at the framed pictures on the wall. Her younger self stood beside my friend's father in one photo, the same eyes, the same smile, but untouched by time. Seeing her then and now, I realized something: beauty doesn't fade, it transforms. Hers had transformed into something deeper, something that carried stories in every line of her face, in the way she moved through the world. She returned with a tray, balancing 2 porcelain cups that rattled softly as she set them down. The faint aroma of cardamom and sugar drifted upward, mixing with her perfume as she leaned slightly closer than she needed to. My throat went dry. I reached for the cup, and before I could stop myself, the words slipped out. Half a joke, half the truth I didn't dare admit fully: "Then don't be so beautiful." The room froze. Or maybe it was just me. For a second, I regretted it, the honesty, the risk. But then I saw it, the tiniest flicker of surprise in her eyes, followed by something softer, something dangerous. She let out a quiet laugh, though it wasn't the casual kind. It was the kind of laugh someone makes when they've been caught off guard, when they don't know whether to scold or to smile. She looked at me over the rim of her cup, and for the first time, there was no shield of formality between us. "That's a bold thing to say," she murmured, her tone carrying both amusement and warning. I shrugged, pretending to be nonchalant, though my pulse was hammering in my chest. "Guess I've been spending too much time around honest people." Her lips curved again, but her eyes didn't let go of mine. In that gaze, unspoken words hovered, curiosity, hesitation, a question neither of us could ask out loud. We sipped our tea in silence, but the air wasn't silent at all. It was alive, humming with something new. Something that had no name yet, only a feeling, only a spark that neither of us had planned to ignite. Over the next few days, I started noticing her in ways I hadn't before. Maybe it was because my mind had already crossed a line, or maybe because once you see someone differently, you can never go back. She was always around the house, of course, in the kitchen, in the garden, on the porch. But now every detail seemed magnified. The way sunlight caught in her hair when she leaned over the roses in the backyard. The way her laughter carried lightly when she was on the phone with a friend. The way she paused sometimes, as though she could feel my eyes on her, before glancing back at me with a knowing smile. I kept telling myself it was just admiration, nothing wrong with noticing someone's elegance, right? But there was more. A quiet pull I didn't know how to explain. One afternoon, I found her in the garden, kneeling in the dirt, her dress brushing against the grass. She looked up when I approached, brushing soil from her hands with a light-hearted sigh. "Your friend is never around when I need help," she teased, "but here you are." I crouched beside her, reaching for the small shovel resting in the soil. "Guess I'll do," I said. She smiled, a real smile, unguarded and warm, and something in my chest tightened. Together, we worked in silence, the kind of silence that wasn't heavy, but full. When our hands brushed over the same patch of soil, hers lingered a second too long. Or maybe mine did. Neither of us moved away quickly. Later, as we sat on the porch, she handed me a glass of water. "You're quieter than your friend," she said, studying me as though she hadn't truly noticed before. "I guess I like listening," I replied, shrugging. "And what exactly do you think you're listening to?" she asked, almost playfully. I met her eyes, steady this time. "You." The word hung between us, heavier than I meant it to. She looked away, but I caught it, that flicker of color rising in her cheeks. She didn't answer, only sipped from her own glass, but her silence said more than words could. The evening air smelled of jasmine, crickets beginning to sing in the distance. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just passing curiosity. This was something slipping quietly into my heart, planting roots before I could stop it. It was late one evening when the house felt unusually still. My friend had gone out with others, leaving behind an emptiness that echoed through the hallways. I found myself lingering in the living room, the soft glow of a lamp spilling golden light across the carpet. And then she appeared, quiet steps carrying her into the room as though she, too, wasn't ready to face the silence alone. She sat across from me, tucking one leg beneath her, and for a moment we said nothing. The weight of unspoken thoughts pressed down, but not in a suffocating way, more like a tide rising slowly, asking to be acknowledged. "You don't have to stay here waiting for him," she said gently, her fingers fiddling with the edge of a cushion. "I'm sure he won't be back for hours." I shrugged. "I don't mind the company." Her eyes flicked up, catching mine, then dropped again. There was hesitation in her, the kind of hesitation that comes when you want to be seen but are afraid of being looked at too closely. She drew in a quiet breath, as though she were gathering courage. "It's strange," she began, her voice low. "Feeling noticed like this. I haven't felt that in a long time." The confession hung in the air. Vulnerable. Raw. She hadn't meant to say it, but once spoken, it couldn't be pulled back. I could see the flicker of regret in her eyes, like she feared she had revealed too much. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. My heart was pounding, but my voice stayed steady. "You deserve to be noticed. More than you realize." She let out a soft laugh, though it wasn't amusement, it was closer to disbelief. "You don't know me well enough to say that." "I know enough," I said quietly. "Enough to see what others might miss." Her hands tightened in her lap, her eyes glistening in the lamplight. She looked at me as though she wanted to argue, but couldn't find the words. For a moment, the world narrowed, the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the faint tick of the clock on the wall, all fading until it was just her and me. Neither of us moved, but something shifted. A door opened, invisible but undeniable, and behind it lay all the things we weren't ready to admit. That night, in the quiet glow of the living room, she wasn't just someone's mother anymore. She was a woman who longed to be seen, and I was the one who had noticed. The next evening felt different. Even before I stepped into the house, there was a quiet hum in the air, as though the walls themselves remembered the conversation we'd shared the night before. My friend had retreated upstairs, leaving us once again in that gentle but dangerous space of silence. She sat across from me, a teacup balanced in her hands. The lamp's glow painted her face in warm light, softening the sharp edges of her features and making her look almost untouchable. Yet at the same time, there was a fragility there, a quiet vulnerability she seemed determined to hide. I reached for my cup, and she leaned forward at the same time, her fingers brushing mine. Just a touch. Skin against skin, warm and delicate. It should have been nothing, an accident. But the moment stretched. Neither of us pulled away. Her eyes lifted slowly, meeting mine, and in them I saw everything she was trying not to say. Conflict. Longing. Fear. "This shouldn't feel this way," she whispered, the words so soft I almost doubted I'd heard them. I wanted to answer, to tell her she wasn't alone in feeling it, that every second near her had become both a comfort and a torment. But my throat felt locked, my voice caught between restraint and honesty. Instead, I let my gaze speak for me. I held her eyes as though letting go would break something fragile between us. Her fingers lingered on mine a breath longer before she finally pulled back, curling her hand around her cup like a shield. She tried to mask it with a sip, but the tremor in her hands betrayed her. I leaned back, forcing myself to breathe evenly, though my heart thundered like a storm. "Sometimes," I said carefully, "the things that feel wrong are the only things that remind us we're alive." She looked at me sharply, as though searching for the line between sincerity and temptation. For a moment, I thought she would tell me to stop. But instead, she only pressed her lips together, silent, her eyes softening again. The air was thick, heavy, yet tender. Every sound seemed amplified, the quiet tick of the clock, the faint hiss of the kettle cooling in the kitchen, the rhythm of her breath. And though no words could name it, we both knew, the almost touch had said more than any confession ever could. The next day was quieter between us. She busied herself in small ways, speaking lightly whenever we crossed paths, but never holding my gaze for long. I understood. What had passed the night before, that accidental brush of fingers, that moment we both allowed to linger, had unsettled something deep within her. I tried to keep myself distracted, but as the hours stretched, I could feel the weight of her silence pressing against me. It wasn't avoidance in the cruel sense, it was protection. She was trying to keep the boundaries intact, even as they threatened to unravel. That evening, I stepped outside onto the porch. The air was cool, the night alive with the distant hum of crickets and the occasional rustle of leaves. I leaned against the wooden railing, staring into the dark yard, trying to convince myself to let it all go. To forget the softness in her eyes, the warmth of her touch. Then the screen door creaked behind me. She stepped out, a shawl draped loosely around her shoulders. For a moment, she didn't speak, only stood there, as if deciding whether she had the courage to join me. Finally, she moved closer and sat beside me on the wooden step, close enough that her shoulder brushed mine. "You make it hard to pretend," she said quietly. Her voice trembled, though her words carried weight. I turned my head, watching her face illuminated by the soft glow of the porch light. She wasn't teasing this time. She wasn't hiding behind smiles. She was admitting something she had fought to keep buried. "Maybe we don't have to pretend," I replied, my voice lower than I intended, steady but filled with all the things I couldn't say aloud. Her lips parted, but no words came. She simply looked at me, eyes shining with conflict, with fear, with an unspoken longing. The silence stretched, heavy yet gentle, like the pause before a storm. I wanted to reach for her hand. I wanted to close the space that still separated us. But instead, I stayed still, because I knew, this was her moment to choose. Her breath caught as she glanced down at my hand resting against the railing, her own fingers inching close, then pulling back. We didn't move further that night. But we didn't need to. The truth was already there, shimmering between us, undeniable and alive. And in the quiet of that porch, under the golden light and cool night air, I knew, the choice was no longer just mine. It was ours. The night stretched on, quiet and endless, as though time itself had slowed just for us. We didn't speak much after that moment on the porch. Words felt unnecessary, even fragile, as though anything spoken too loudly might break what had so delicately formed between us. Instead, we simply sat there, shoulder to shoulder, letting silence do what voices could not. After a while, she let out a long breath, one that sounded more like surrender than defeat. Slowly, carefully, she leaned closer until her head came to rest against my shoulder. The weight of it startled me, not because it was heavy, but because it was real. Solid. A choice she had made, even if she couldn't say it aloud. I stayed still, not daring to move. My heart raced, but my body softened, adjusting to her warmth against me. I could smell the faint trace of her perfume mixed with the cool night air. The steady rhythm of her breathing seemed to echo in my chest, calming and electrifying all at once. "Don't look at me like that," she whispered at last, her words carrying the faintest smile. This time, it wasn't a warning. It wasn't a shield. It was something gentler, an acknowledgement of what lingered between us, a thread neither of us could cut. I smiled, though she couldn't see it with her head against me. My voice was quiet when I replied, softer than it had ever been. "I can't help it." The words weren't bold this time. They weren't teasing. They were simply honest, stripped of everything but the truth. She didn't pull away. She didn't argue. Instead, she nestled closer, her shawl slipping slightly as she shifted, her cheek pressed lightly against my chest. My arm hovered for a moment, uncertain, before I finally let it fall gently around her shoulders. She didn't resist. If anything, she leaned into it, as though it was the place she had been meaning to find all along. The night wrapped around us, soft and protective. Above, the moonlight filtered through the leaves, casting delicate shadows across the porch. The crickets sang their quiet chorus, filling the spaces between our breaths. We didn't define it. We didn't try to name it. There were no declarations, no promises. Just a moment suspended in time, fragile, tender, and entirely ours. And in that quiet closeness, I understood something simple but profound. Sometimes love doesn't need to be spoken. Sometimes, it only needs to be felt.